The reason this topic matters is simple. If you're watching this on Legacy of Survival, you appreciate real history, applied history, and the kind of knowledge that actually improves your self-reliance skills. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because what we're about to go through is the kind of deep, practical material most history documentaries never touch. For the next minute, consider this. During the Second World War, soldiers, resistance fighters, sailors, and downed airmen kept fire going in conditions that would ruin your modern lighter in seconds. Torrential rain, Arctic wind, mud, sleet, and soaked uniforms. Yet they produced flame, maintained flame, and leveraged flame with a reliability that often meant the difference between survival and freezing to death. That contrast alone should make anyone studying both history and preparedness sit up. Because if a soldier in 1942 could get a stable fire going in winds that would blow your torch lighter sideways, there's something to learn. Something modern gear has forgotten. The first reason Second World War fires worked in storms is that they relied on fuel that wasn't delicate. Most modern lighters depend on pressurized butane, which becomes unreliable in the cold, loses pressure as the tank empties, and struggles in wind because of its clean, precision-focused flame. During the Second World War, fires were almost always built using solid, slow-burning fuel sources. Things like resin-heavy pine, birch bark packed with natural oils, tar-soaked rope fibres that were actually issued in naval kits, or just simple fat wood carried right in your pocket. These fuels, well, they don't care about temperature extremes. They don't lose pressure. And, crucially, they don't fail to ignite. So, when you scrape shavings from a resin block or peel strips of birch bark, you're actually tapping into materials that burn even when they're saturated. If you want to put this into practice today, a strip of fat wood carried in your pack will, honestly, outperform any lighter in wet wind. Just shave thin curls with a knife, gather them up into a compact pile, and then ignite with even the weakest spark. Now, the second reason is that sparks, not flames, were quite often the ignition method. People tend to forget this. Fighters in the Second World War, whether in Europe, the Pacific or North Africa, weren't just walking around with pocket torches. They used ferro rods long before the survival community ever glamorized them. The rods issued to pilots and commandos produced molten sparks that burned far hotter than a lighter flame. A spark hotter than 3,000 degrees doesn't care about wind velocity. It cuts through it. That's why a World War II pilot shot down in Norway could still ignite shavings in a blizzard. If you want this same reliability, modern ferro rods still operate on the same principle. Keep one in your kit and practice scraping with the spine of a knife at a 45-degree angle. You'll get a shower of sparks that will stick even on damp tinder. The third reason World War II fires succeeded is that tinder was treated as gear, not an afterthought. Today, people assume tinder will simply be available. In World War II, soldiers assumed the opposite. They prepared it. They carried char cloth in tins, which stays dry even when everything else is soaked. They saved parachute silk coated in oil. They stuffed pockets with dry shavings before entering wet terrain. firemaking started long before the actual moment of ignition. You can recreate this mindset by, keeping a small metal tin in your pocket holding cotton pads lightly coated with wax, shavings of dry wood, or maybe a folded piece of char cloth. These materials take flame instantly, even when rain is hitting your shoulders. The fourth reason is that WWII fire structures were built for storms, not fair weather. This is where history becomes practical technique. Fire bases were built first. Soldiers placed down a platform of bark, sticks, or even thin stones to keep the fire from soaking up moisture from the ground. Against wind, they built half-shelters with branches or helmets, or dug small pits to stabilize airflow. The fifth reason is that WWII fires integrated local materials far better than modern users do. A contemporary camper relies heavily on what they brought. A WWII soldier relied heavily on what was around him. Birch bark, spruce tips, pine resin, dry inner wood from fallen logs, and even coal dust mixed with cloth scraps became sources of ignition. People really underestimate just how much dry material there is inside a log, even when it looks completely soaked on the outside. Back then, soldiers would use their knives to split the wood, working their way in until they reached the dry core, and that's what they'd use for kindling. Honestly, you can do the same thing today. Just take any wet log and carve away the outer layer until you find that pale, dry material inside. The sixth reason is that maintenance of flame was just as important as ignition. Modern users tend to light a fire once and just assume it will keep itself going. But we troops, they understood that a small, steady flame is actually better than a big, dramatic one. They made sure to feed fires consistently instead of just dumping a large amount of fuel all at once. This approach kept the temperature high and avoided smothering the fire.
So, if you want to recreate the WWII,
In the end, WWII fires worked in storms because they were built on robustness, not convenience. The lighter in your pocket these days is honestly a marvel of engineering, but it's also a bit of a fragile luxury. WWII firecraft, on the other hand, was built on principles that simply do not fail in wind, cold, or mud. If you understand those principles, you can, apply them any time you need a dependable flame. If you found this breakdown valuable and you want more historical survival knowledge delivered with precision and depth, do subscribe to Legacy of Survival and share this guide with someone who appreciates real history applied to real-world skills.